Hello Tirana, greetings from Berlin. My name is Dagmar Hovestadt. I am the spokesperson for the Federal Commissioner for the Stasi records, and I am responsible for the communication for this archive. And I'm happy to answer 3 questions that you provided me with last week, and hopefully they will help you in the course of your workshop. Happy to help. So the first question was around the fact that our institution, the Stasi Records Archive, managed the cases of personalities, of historical personalities, or persons with political functions or powers, and when we release these records. The question was then, have there been or has there been a debate about the authenticity of Stasi documents and the way they should be studied? So the answer that I would give here is there's a clear distinction between those of records of historical persons that have been persecuted and those who have been involved. So we always have to make that distinction. Irrespective of their historical or current position, persons working for the Stasi officially or unofficially, so that have worked for the secret police, to this day will be confronted publicly with what the Stasi documented about them. So that's very important. Regardless of what happened to people today, or their historical role, if they have worked for the Stasi officially or unofficially, those records will be given to the public domain. Those persecuted, if still alive, have a say in the access when they're historically important person. The most famous case was the case of the former federal chancellor Helmut Kohl. In 2000, he went to court against the release of Stasi records with information on him as a persecuted person. He has been in the view of the secret police. Phone records have been listened into, and since he was a political person at the time, a historical figure, journalists wanted to access his records, and he went to court to prevent us from releasing these records. The court decided that those subjected to Stasi persecution or the surveillance by the Stasi, who were prominent or historical figures at the time, ought to have a say in the release of their files. So since then, that was around 2002 when the court proceedings were done, we write to a person and notify them of an upcoming release, and they can deny it or, by not reacting, okay the release. So that means there may be a political figure of the 1980s who is in the Stasi records. A journalist wants to access that because they wanted to find out how the Stasi dealt with that person. We will inform this politician about the journalist's request, and he can decide whether we can release these records or not. So ever since the Kohl verdict, highly illegal measures, however, like wiretapped phone conversations and confiscated letters or mail, are never to be accessed without the permission of the historical figure. To this day, it is legally not clear if that holds true for a time when such a person is dead for 30 years. So we are expecting some legal activity in some time in the near future by journalists to see if they can access records, even those that are highly illegally obtained, like by wiretapping a phone conversation, if they can be released. In the court cases protesting the release of Stasi records, either in cases by collaborators or alleged collaborators, or in cases by persecuted well-known figures, the authenticity or truth of the records has sometimes been questioned. So a person who was a collaborator has said that whatever is in the record is not true, and he is fighting the designation of an unofficial collaborator in court. To my knowledge, however, it was always only connected to what was written on the page, and never the fact that this document was not an authentic Stasi document. On occasion, a person on social media raises the issue about a document not being real or authentic, but as an archive, we are a federal archive in Germany, we take the job of being the authenticator of these documents very seriously, and we also have a high credibility in the public sphere. So if we say something is an authentic Stasi document, there's no court who would doubt this, and hardly any serious voice in the public realm would either doubt this. But we can't obviously not speak to what's on the page, what was written on this page by the Stasi, so that truthfulness can be debated, but the authenticity of the record is pretty much not debated. Your second question was, the public debate that was generated through the opening of their files, how was this public debate managed and coordinated, or did we orient ourselves in this debate with other state institutions? To me, that's a very interesting question. I don't think we or any other institution ever managed the public debate with any amount of control or any goals. It just evolved. The press had access to records and started its own narrative about what's in these records and how to engage with the past. In Germany, there was a parliamentary commission from 1992 to 1998 debating the SED dictatorship and how it worked and how to analyze it, the Enquete-Kommission. That was covered widely on TV, news, radio, etc., and it influenced the public debate as well very much. Also, the Stasi records played quite an important role in this commission, in this federal commission. The federal commissioner, so all three of the federal commissioners, the first one was Mr. Gauck, the second commissioner was Mrs. Böttler, the current commissioner is Mr. Jahn. They became influential experts and interpreters of the files in the public debate, and they helped to understand how to read the files, but each had their own idea and focus and definition of how to deal with the files. So there was also not one planned single idea, but sort of an open, multi-perspective debate. In parallel, the follow-up party to the East German Communist Party shaped a public debate with a sort of counter-narrative. They criticized the way the records were being used to dismantle the old regime. Around the year 2000, when the economy wasn't that great and the people were to a certain degree disillusioned with the unification process, there was an intense phase of nostalgia for the East, and the public debate took a different turn again and became a bit more splintered still. So of course there were always staunch supporters of the files and the critical reappraisal of the communist past of East Germany, and then there were people who thought it was not so important anymore and that we could slowly forget the past. So now, 2020, we are in a phase where we communicate the value of these records for individuals and society, for historians and democracy, and we try to communicate them into the future. It is helpful to position yourself not at the forefront of the fight over good or bad records or the badness of the old regime. It is helpful to position yourself as a conduit through which whoever wishes can learn more about the past, to understand how it worked and hopefully see what was wrong with that past and uses this understanding for changes today. So we try to have one could say a classical archival position in being neutral towards the content of the documents, but enabling society to negotiate how to use the records and how to use them to think about the past differently in any type of way that society sees fit. A very democratic idea on how to negotiate the past. So here's the third question you asked. The role of media of this processes of facing the truths of the Stasi that used the information given from us into the public realm about these personalities. What was the role of the media? If there are facts or names anonymized in the documents to provide, which we of course did, does media continue to investigate or apply for more information about those people you can't find in the records who are anonymized? Is there, according to the right for information to the public, or is there a right to truth? Well, the Stasi Records Act, so our legal base, is very clear. We can only leave open names if the Stasi documented collaboration or delivery of information of a person. So it literally said in the Stasi Records Act that if you were consenting to delivery of information, your name can be made available in the public. Sometimes journalists try to dig deeper and they reapply for more records around a case to see if other records give them missing information. If they follow the law and prove their interest in the past workings of the Stasi, we need to provide access. We cannot withhold records because we feel there is not a good motivation to access these records. If you say we want to find out what happened in the past, you have a legitimate right to access these records, and then we provide them. We cannot control what and how they're being published. That is not our job. We understand our job to make sure The request is within the Stasi Records Act legal framework, and then the access is based on the provisions of the Stasi Records Act. We do not question motives or deny access because we don't like the way a journalist thinks about, let's say, a historical figure. Every now and then we see journalists asking for something, and they clearly have knowledge of what is in the archive. So they have a very specific request, and you can wonder how come they know about it. But if the access request is legitimate, we have no power to ask them how they came to know about something. Journalism is free. They can ask research questions, and they will receive access. But if this involves a well-known person, and that person has been the subject of Stasi activity while in public position way back then, before 1990, we inform the person on the request and give them the records as well to decide if the journalists can access. So I referred to that before. This is what happened after the Kohl verdict. I think this should help you a little bit more in understanding how we framed the debate, how the public debate evolved, and how the rights of journalists can be respected to further a very open discussion on the past and what these records say. I know, it's very hard to maintain neutrality, but we try to do that in communication very much, because it's an invitation to many groups in society to look at the records and make their own formation and idea of this history. And for that, the institution that holds the record should be authentic towards the records and should be neutral towards their uses, and should help anybody who requests access to better understand the records and give them the necessary historical context and even administrative context, so you can read what a record actually means. Okay, so those were the 3 questions. I hope this helps the discussion at least, and have a good workshop, and maybe until some other time, greetings from Berlin. Bye.